Garden to Greed: Harms of Gentrification as a Consequence of Addressing Food Injustice. Food injustice, including food insecurity and nutritional inaccess, are deeply intersectional and prevalent forms of oppression in urban areas across the U.S. Important questions arise regarding how these issues should be addressed and by who. One strategy that has gained traction in recent years to combat food injustice involves incorporating urban agriculture as an effort to improve self-sufficiency, food access, and community wellness. However, the introduction of urban agriculture has driven gentrification in these vulnerable neighborhoods, displacing local communities and exacerbating further harms through capability deficits of bodily health and integrity, autonomy over one's environment, and community connection. We used Martha Nussbaum's Central Capabilities approach as a framework to assess the harms facing communities affected by food-related gentrification. Urban agriculture and community gardens often characterize responses to food injustice, but it demands a critical assessment of the pathways that may in fact compound disadvantage for the most vulnerable communities. First, bodily health is one of Nussbaum's central capabilities as a component of living a dignified human life through which individuals should be able to have good health and be adequately nourished. The effects of trying to protect bodily health, physically and mentally, through pathways of food are complicated by several factors as whitewashed gentrification is amplified. A vicious cycle of poverty and food injustice intertwines with repercussions of interventions that have further harmed low-income communities' health. Pathways between diet and health outcomes for a dignified life are abundantly clear, but implanting sources of healthier foods may amplify the most vulnerable to adverse health outcomes if not mindfully developed. For example, food retailers market their business and products as sustainable and healthy due to political popularity, appeal to consumer behavior, and because healthy foods are genuinely important. As an attractive component of residential communities, capital flows into low-income neighborhoods, drives product prices higher, and incentivizes supermarkets to adopt such marketing schemes for profit through this model of supermarket greenlining. Surrounding neighborhoods around fresh food, organic-based franchises cause sizable increases in real estate property values and appreciation rates, fueling advantages for some stakeholders and capability deficits for others. According to the Effect of Community Gardens on Neighboring Property Values economic report, a community garden in New York City was found to raise a neighborhood property value by up to 9.4 percentage points within 5 years of the garden's opening. As necessary resources are available only to those with prior economic privilege and social mobility, it benefits stakeholders like realtors, property owners, and supermarket corporate workers. On the other hand, low-income communities are unwillingly forced to relocate to more affordable zones, violating their bodily integrity and perpetuating unhealthful food options. In Detroit, for example, 80% of the city's residents rely on fringe food retailers such as liquor stores, gas stations, dollar stores, or convenience stores. Without conditions for healthy foods, further inequality amounts through higher rates of diabetes, cancer, hypertension, and other diet-related illnesses. These unjust harms are experienced by people of common characteristics such as race or income and indicate likely group-based oppression.
The introduction of urban agriculture in low-income urban communities can inadvertently place limits on the autonomy of residents. When leadership is sourced primarily externally, the voices of community members may be discredited, ignored, or silenced. Following the framework set out by Miranda Fricker on epistemic injustice, when community residents are not listened to as speakers due to ingrained prejudice, particularly towards members of communities of color, they can experience testimonial injustice that results in further harms. Paulo Freire posits that the liberation of the oppressed must come from revolution by the oppressed themselves. However, when local residents don't have a seat at the table, this becomes more challenging. If there is no space for people to speak out, how can they enact the policies they wish to see? Although city planners and leaders of urban agriculture projects may intend to help communities through gardens and revitalization, by not asking the communities what they want and prioritizing their ideas, these efforts can serve to threaten people's autonomy and dignity. When a group cannot exercise their capability to participate in making choices that affect their own environment, according to authors Cohen and Reynolds, primarily white, affluent leadership may continue to make decisions that, intentionally or unintentionally, drive residents out of an area. Such forced displacement can also limit people's power over their material goods and property. A loss of autonomy due to the external leadership brought in by green gentrification can cycle back into impacts to bodily health and to groups' sense of belonging in a community. Residents of communities should be afforded the right to feel a sense of belonging in their neighborhood. Even if residents do the work of fighting food injustice and create community gardens for their own liberation, as Freire might hope, the very creation of these gardens may become an avenue for gentrification. Fat Beats, a food justice organization in Oakland, California, puts the community first in their employment and food distribution. Even still, real estate agents see their gardens as an asset to the area and promote the neighborhood to more affluent buyers. This speaks to Young's idea of exploitation. As residents move out and more affluent people move in, the fruits of their labor are benefiting both sellers and potential buyers, not the communities who created them. When city planners see potential in an area, further revitalization projects may remove spaces that appear run down to outside sources. Without community members who wish to be heard being a part of the conversation, spaces holding cultural, historical, and social value can be destroyed to improve the aesthetic appeal of a place, limiting community gathering and isolating community members. John Washington and Joyce Taylor, two Black business owners in Portland, Oregon, express frustration when community improvements, such as bike lanes and community gardens, are put into Black neighborhoods because they see that as the end of their Black community having a safe space and feeling welcome there. If programs formed by outside forces have resulted in the driving out of communities before, the fear that they may do so again can place people in the trap of lacking a good option. Communities may recognize that food injustice is affecting the health of their members, but may also fear loss of autonomy in community decision-making, as well as the displacement and isolation that may result if improvements to their area lead to gentrification.